The asset was not listed in any ledger, held in any vault, or recorded in the Domesday Book. Its value was measured not in pounds sterling, but in centuries of accumulated power and silence. It was called, in the cold vernacular of the palace's crisis committee, the Andrew Archive. And on a rain-lashed October morning, it was placed on the negotiating table as the only currency deemed valuable enough to buy the silence of a duchess. The meeting was held not in a palace, but in the anonymous, oak-paneled conference room of the London law firm Harbottle & Lewis. On one side, Sir Michael Stevens, Keeper of the Privy Purse, and Fiona Shackleton. On the other, Elena Cruz, lead counsel for Virginia Giuffre's legal team, and a senior official from the U.S. Department of Justice with a face like a closed vault. The subject was not Prince Andrew's guilt. That was a foregone conclusion. The subject was containment, and the price had just skyrocketed. The subpoena to the Duchess stands, Cruz stated, placing a copy of the court order on the table like a winning poker hand. She will testify. The question is, will she testify in a sealed deposition with agreed parameters, or will she testify in open court where every answer will be a global headline? Your choice. Sir Michael did not blink. You want something more valuable than headlines. You want history. He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. It was an index, a table of contents for ruined item 1, the complete diaries of HRH, the Duke of York, 1990-2011, not the redacted versions provided to the FBI in 2020. The originals, including personal annotations, private telephone numbers, and coded references to individuals listed only by initials or nicknames. Imirzals are desk registers for Royal Lodge, Balmoral and Sandringham, private apartments, 1995-2010. Every weekend, every shooting party, every informal gathering. Names, dates, durations of stay, item 3, flight manifests and passenger lists for all non-official travel by the Duke of York, 1992-2015, including trips on private aircraft chartered by third parties. Item 4, correspondence files. Letters, faxes, and early emails to and from the Duke, from a select list of 23 individuals, financiers, politicians, socialites whose names had surfaced in previous Epstein investigations. It was a map to the heart of a shadow kingdom. This was not evidence against Andrew. It was the master key to the network he operated within. The DOJ official's eyes narrowed. This is extensive. Its authentication would be a precondition. It will be delivered with a sworn affidavit from the deputy keeper of the Royal Archives, attesting to its provenance, Shackleton replied, her voice icy. In return, the Duchess's testimony is given in a single, video-recorded deposition. The transcript is sealed for 75 years. No public hearing, no follow-up questions beyond the agreed scope. You get the blueprint to the past. We get a lock on the present. Cruz leaned back, a predator calculating the weight of a fresh kill. The archive is compelling, but it's backward-looking. It tells us about the ecosystem. The Duchess's testimony is about the human experience within that ecosystem. We need both to build an airtight pattern. The archive gets us the who and where, she gets us the how and why. She paused. We need one more thing. Which is? Sir Michael asked, his stomach tightening. Access, the DOJ official said. A formal, irrevocable agreement that US and UK law enforcement in perpetuity will have direct, unimpeded liaison with the Royal Protection Command regarding any future security concerns related to members of the family and their associates. No more diplomatic immunity roadblocks. No more sovereign territory excuses. We want a pipeline. The demand was breathtaking. They were asking to embed a permanent law enforcement monitor within the royal household, a Trojan horse of accountability. It was a surrender of sovereignty. Shackleton paled. That is impossible. The security of the sovereign was compromised for decades by the man whose diaries you're now trying to trade, Cruz interrupted. This isn't about punishing the Queen. It's about ensuring that the next Andrew, the next associate of a Jeffrey Epstein, cannot hide behind palace walls. We get the archive and we get the access. You get the seal on the testimony. That is the deal. In Montecito, Meghan was told none of this. Her lawyers were only informed. A framework is being discussed that would limit your exposure. She was the chattel in the transaction, her voice the commodity being traded for a trove of secrets. After 14 hours of negotiation, the deal was struck in a legally binding memorandum of understanding. The Crown would hand over the Andrew Archive. It would grant the unprecedented law enforcement access. In return, Meghan's testimony would be sealed for 75 years, and the U.S. attorneys would quietly advise the court that Prince Andrew's full and historic cooperation had been obtained, allowing them to focus their public case solely on him. Isolating him completely, the palace had traded the kingdom's most sensitive secrets and a slice of its independence to build a firebreak around a renegade duchess. They had decided that the past of one disgraced prince and the future autonomy of the firm were a price worth paying to prevent Meghan Markle from speaking freely. They had in effect paid a ransom to keep their own secrets and hers buried. The bargain was done. All that remained was the exchange. The exchange was not a physical handoff in a shadowy car park. It was a digital and diplomatic transaction of exquisite complexity, choreographed like a spy swap at the height of the Cold War. Phase 1. The Archive. In a secure, temperature-controlled sub-basement of the Royal Archives at Windsor, two individuals worked under the watchful eye of the deputy keeper. One was a palace archivist, their hands sheathed in white cotton gloves. The other was a technical specialist from GCHQ. The archivist carefully retrieved the items from a locked, lead-lined cabinet, the leather-bound diaries, the vellum guest books, the faded flight manifests in cardboard folders. The GCHQ specialist then performed a high-resolution, forensic digital scan of every page, every marginal scribble, every impression left by a pen on the page beneath. These scans were not simple photographs. They were multispectral images that could reveal erased pencil marks, indentations, and chemical compositions of ink. The raw data was encrypted with a quantum-resistant algorithm, split into 3 parts, and uploaded to 3 separate secure servers, one at the UK National Cybersecurity Center, one at the US Department of Justice's Secure Data Facility in Virginia, and one held in escrow by the Swiss Federal Department of Justice. A simultaneous, physical copy was made on archival-quality paper. This set was placed in a titanium briefcase, handcuffed to a courier from the U.S. Embassy and driven directly to a waiting diplomatic bag at Heathrow, affording it absolute legal immunity from search or seizure. The originals were returned to the vault. The Crown had handed over the information, but not the sacred artifacts themselves. Phase 2. The Access. At the same time, in a separate wing of the Foreign Office, a classified addendum to the UK-US Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty MLAT was being signed. It created a new permanent liaison office, the Bilateral Royal Security Oversight Committee, BRSOC. It would consist of 2 senior officers from the FBI's International Corruption Unit, 2 from the UK's National Crime Agency, and 1 non-voting representative from the royal household. This committee would have the right to request, and in cases involving suspected serious criminality compel, information from the Royal Protection Command regarding the overseas travel, associations, and security assessments of any royal family member beyond the immediate sovereign and direct heir. It was, as one horrified palace courtier muttered, a permanent FBI desk in the Beau Room. Phase 3. The Testimony. Only after cryptographic confirmations were received from both the US and Swiss servers did the final phase begin. Meghan Markle was flown not to London, but to the U.S. Air Force Base at RAF Mildenhall, a sovereign American territory on British soil. Her deposition took place in a secure briefing room deep within the base, under the joint authority of the U.S. District Court and the U.K. Crown Court. The agreed-upon 200 questions were asked. She answered in a flat, exhausted monotone, hewing precisely to the narrow lane her lawyers and the palace negotiators had drilled into her. She confirmed dates, identified voices on the Andrew tapes, described the social mechanics of the circles she moved in. She offered context, not confession. She was a historian of a disgraced court, not a witness against her own crimes. As she spoke, a silent observer watched via secure video link from Buckingham Palace, Sir Michael Stevens. He held a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding. Each time her testimony ventured near a red line, a direct accusation of criminal knowledge against a senior working royal, a specific claim of institutional instruction to lie, he would give a nearly imperceptible nod to the king's private secretary sitting beside Meghan's lawyer, who would then object. The dance was flawless, the testimony was neutered, made safe. They were buying her silence not by gagging her, but by scripting her. In Montecito, Harry knew only that a resolution had been reached. He received an encrypted summary, testimony complete, terms satisfied, situation contained. He had no idea of the cost. He didn't know about the diaries now in Virginia. or the FBI's new backdoor into his family's life. He believed, in his grief and rage, that the institution had simply flexed its legal muscle and silenced another critic. The tragic irony was that they had done the opposite. They had surrendered a piece of their sovereignty to accommodate her. To make her safe from a truth too dangerous for them all, the final transfer was the most symbolic. As Meghan's deposition concluded, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a sealed ex-parte filing to the judge in the Giuffre case. It stated that, following extraordinary cooperation from UK authorities providing historic material evidence, the plaintiffs had agreed to drop all efforts to compel testimony from any other members of the British aristocracy or social circles. Prince Andrew would stand alone in the dock. The network was granted immunity in exchange for its king. The bargain was complete. The Crown had traded the past, the archive, the eviscerating details of Andrew's network, the future, the access, a measure of its own operational secrecy, the narrative, the isolation of Andrew, throwing one prince to the wolves to save the rest of the pride. In return, they received a sealed transcript, Meghan's dangerous knowledge locked away for 75 years. Contained scandal. The crisis shrank from royal family versus Epstein to Andrew versus Epstein. His victims. Institutional survival, a path to weather the storm without full-blown revolution. They had traded gold for lead, secrets for silence, sovereignty for survival. They had calculated that the scandal of the trade itself would never see the light of day. They believed that Andrew tapes were the only tapes that mattered. They were wrong. Because the most damaging recording was not of a prince and a duchess, it was the sound of a 1,000-year-old institution quietly bartering away its soul. The reckoning arrived not with a scream, but with the dry rustle of archival paper in a federal evidence room. The Andrew archive, traded so delicately, proved too vast, too toxic to remain a silent tool of prosecutors. It was a genie that could not be forced back into its bottle. A junior DOJ attorney, cross-referencing the diaries with a separate, unrelated investigation into offshore banking, found a discrepancy. A weekend at Balmoral listed in Andrew's 2006 diary with a specific guest did not appear in the official sanitized court circular published that week. The guest was a financier later convicted for fraud. The attorney dug deeper. Soon, a pattern emerged. Omitted names, concealed meetings, a parallel shadow court hosted within the official one. This was not just evidence for the Giuffre case. This was evidence of a systematic, decades-long practice of deception by the institution itself, using the sovereign's private homes to host individuals of dubious character while maintaining a pristine public face. The archive was no longer just about Andrew's vice. It was the monarchy's ledger of hidden compromise. The DOJ faced a dilemma. To use the archive in court against Andrew would require disclosing its source, revealing the trade, and breaching the Memorandum of Understanding. But to ignore its broader implications was a dereliction of duty. They chose a third devastating path: a confidential criminal referral to the UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, detailing evidence of possible fraud, misconduct in public office, and corruption within the royal household facilitated by the very access agreement, BRSO, the palace had signed. The NCA, now armed with both the American referral and its own mandate from the Barsot Committee, launched Operation Carousel. It was the investigation the palace had traded its secrets to avoid. The access corridor they had granted became the thoroughfare for their own investigation. The first casualty was the sealed for 75 years fiction. A UK High Court judge, presented with evidence from Operation Carousel that the sealed testimony might pertain to ongoing criminal investigations beyond Andrew, ordered a limited, secret review of Meghan's deposition transcript. The seal was pierced. The walls were crumbling. The final public reckoning was not a lurid tabloid headline, but a sober, 300-page report from the House of Commons Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee. Its title, The Crown and Confidentiality: Lessons from the Sussex Testimony Arrangements. It did not print the testimony. It did not reveal the archive. Instead, it detailed the mechanism of the trade, condemning the secretive and constitutionally dubious bargain struck between the monarchy and a foreign power. It declared the BRSO agreement a de facto erosion of sovereignty and called for the full, transparent publication of all historical royal guest lists, a direct evisceration of the private royal sanctum. The Crown had traded for silence and received a thunderous, permanent indictment of its right to secrecy. They had traded Andrew's past to protect Meghan's, and in doing so, had handed their enemies the blueprint to their own vulnerability. The Andrew Tates had been the bait, but the archive was the trap, and the palace, in its panic, had willingly walked into it, paying for its own containment with the very keys to its kingdom. The bargain had not saved them. It had documented their guilt in perpetuity and left the door to their most private rooms permanently, legally wedged open,